A young girl sits chained by her wrists, letting out a sigh as a man stares at her from behind the bars. She begs him for help. Meanwhile, Private Second-Class Yamagishi sits with his head lowered as a middle-aged man reprimands him, calling him the very definition of useless for failing even to stand properly or salute. The older man sharply orders Yamagishi to look at his rank. Yamagishi immediately stands, salutes, and apologizes. The middle-aged man mutters in disgust as he notices the mud covering the young man's chest and his messy, dirty black hair. He admits that he never wanted to recruit people like this, but the army is desperately short on manpower. Yamagishi simply laughs good-naturedly and explains that his black hair has looked like this since birth. He adds that if he had known an honorable officer was coming, he would have cleaned the mud off first. The middle-aged man orders him to keep himself clean at all times, questioning whether Yamagishi is even capable of taking care of simple things. Yamagishi is taken aback. The desert in this region is strangely muddy, almost like a swamp, so their clothes become dirty easily, while clean water is extremely scarce. Yamagishi thinks that the man would never understand unless he had actually lived in this region for a long time. At the moment, Yamagishi is stationed in Taraba as part of the armed forces. He is originally a wanderer, but after spending all his travel money in this country, he decides to stay for a while and join the mercenary army. According to the information he receives, Taraba is currently in the middle of a war with the surrounding nations. The conflict begins after crop failures and rapid climate changes suddenly stop the rain across the region, causing farmland to wither and leaving people without enough drinking water or food. As a result, neighboring countries declare war for a brutal reason. They would rather steal what they need than starve. The attacks from the southern country grow increasingly intense, forcing most of the soldiers to be sent to the southern front. This leaves the northern front severely understaffed, so recruitment for new soldiers begins. Yamagishi ends up being the only one assigned to guard the northern front. 2 days after he begins his duty, the enemy realizes that the northern front is severely lacking both soldiers and weapons. When enemy troops launch an attack, Yamagishi stands there alone. He prepares himself in his cloak, confusing the soldiers who see him because there is only one man defending the entire position. Yamagishi grips his sword and remains on guard. When the first enemy unit charges, he swings his blade and takes them down. But then a second unit arrives, followed by a third. The enemies continue pouring in throughout the day and night. Yamagishi begins to struggle under the constant attacks, but he is still able to hold them back because the path leading to the front is narrow, forcing the enemy soldiers to advance through a single route. While continuing to defend the position, he sends a request for reinforcements along with the report he has already prepared. Yamagishi is dismissed from the army, leaving him stunned and unable to understand what he has done wrong. The middle-aged man tells him that he has read the report Yamagishi wrote, but several parts of it are obviously lies. Yamagishi remains confused, unable to see what could possibly be false. The man then explains that he simply cannot believe Yamagishi defeated an enemy magical combat unit. Yamagishi is taken aback, realizing that the unit is the same one that attacked him late last Sunday. They use extremely fast, high-speed magic, making them nearly impossible to track. Yamagishi remembers struggling to catch a woman named Arn because of how incredibly fast she is. The middle-aged man laughs when he hears this, explaining that the unit Yamagishi describes is actually a mass assassination unit. By claiming to have defeated them, Yamagishi has essentially dug his own grave. They are a special unit whose identities are kept hidden, and no one can see them coming or stop them once they begin an attack. Everyone knows only one thing about them: their female leader is named Arn. Arn is known as the shadow hero of her homeland, so the middle-aged man concludes that Yamagishi's report is shallow and obviously fabricated. Yamagishi, however, remembers the next unit that arrives. Their numbers are small, but the presence and aura they give off are overwhelmingly powerful. Heavy footsteps approach through the battlefield as a cloaked figure suddenly rushes toward Yamagishi and draws a sword against him. Yamagishi immediately raises his own blade and deflects the attack, stopping the sword before it can reach him. As the cloaked figure moves again, Yamagishi catches sight of the faces of two young women beneath their hoods. The clash between their swords grows rapid and powerful, with every strike producing sharp impacts that echo through the area. Several times, the two girls manage to evade Yamagishi's attacks, moving quickly enough to keep him from landing a decisive blow. Yamagishi begins wondering who exactly his opponents are this time. One of the women finally pulls back the hood covering her head and reveals her face, identifying herself as Arn. She also asks who Yamagishi is, prompting him to introduce himself as a private second class. Arn immediately suspects that he is joking, because she cannot believe someone of such an ordinary rank can possess this level of strength. Yamagishi, meanwhile, wonders whether he is actually strong at all, especially when he knows there are people who are even stronger than him. Arn then makes an unexpected offer. She invites Yamagishi to join her team and assures him that she can arrange almost anything he wants, regardless of how much he expects to be paid. She even promises to provide him with a good home and the best possible living environment. Arn takes the offer even further, joking that she can even arrange a wife for him if that is what he wants. Yamagishi is left completely confused by what she is talking about. Arn quickly admits that the last part is only a joke, explaining that someone as strong as Yamagishi would surely be highly valued even in his own country. With that, Arn suddenly runs away, leaving Yamagishi behind while bidding him farewell and declaring that her team is the strongest in the world. Her team acknowledges that they have been defeated, but they still leave with their pride intact. Yamagishi watches them disappear and begins thinking about the encounter. He admits that Arn and her team are indeed extremely strong, but he cannot understand why they are given such a terrifying reputation. From what he has personally experienced, the intelligence reports about them must be wrong. Their strength is undeniable, yet their actual behavior does not match the frightening image described in the reports. Back in front of the middle-aged officer, the man laughs at Yamagishi's explanation. He tells him that the court will decide his punishment, leaving Yamagishi even more confused about what is happening. Yamagishi insists that everything written in his report is factual and that he has not lied about anything. The older man continues to chuckle, clearly unconvinced, as he watches Yamagishi stubbornly maintain his story despite everything he has been told. To him, Yamagishi is simply refusing to give up on an obvious lie. The old man suddenly notices the sword resting across Yamagishi's back and finds it strange. Yamagishi explains that the original sword mount has been damaged, so he replaces it with another one, and he has already written this detail in his report. However, the old man remains unconvinced. He cannot understand how someone with a body as small as Yamagishi's can possibly carry and wield such a massive sword. The old man then orders Yamagishi to swing the sword in front of him. Yamagishi hesitates and makes sure the man is truly giving him permission to do it. The old man gives his approval with an almost mocking attitude, as if he expects Yamagishi to prove that he cannot handle the weapon. Yamagishi reaches for the enormous sword and draws it from behind his body. In a single movement, he swings the blade forward until it passes directly in front of the old man's eyes, then pulls it back and returns the sword to its original position. The old man immediately begins to tremble. Yamagishi has just demonstrated that he is telling the truth, and the weapon is clearly not too heavy for him to wield. Instead of admitting his mistake, the old man suddenly becomes furious and shouts for his soldiers. He orders them to secure Yamagishi immediately, accusing him of swinging a sword directly in front of his superior's face. Before Yamagishi can even understand what is happening, two soldiers move to either side of him and take him into custody. Yamagishi is left completely bewildered. He keeps wondering how the situation can possibly turn out like this when he has already submitted his report and done everything he can to protect the northern border. Something about this situation feels wrong. Yamagishi believes that military officials cannot possibly be foolish enough to treat him as a criminal simply because he has done his duty and reported what actually happened. Yet, despite his confusion, he is taken away in a carriage to an unknown location. When they arrive, Yamagishi is brought through a back gate rather than receiving anything resembling a proper welcome. As he enters the building, he notices several people whispering among themselves while looking in his direction, clearly discussing him and the strange situation surrounding his arrival. The old man points toward Yamagishi and informs him that a military trial will take place the following day, so he must spend the night inside a cell. Yamagishi is genuinely surprised when he enters the cell and discovers that it actually contains a bed. For the past 6 months, he has been sleeping on the border with nothing more than a piece of cloth covered in mud wrapped around him. Compared to that miserable existence, an actual bed feels almost luxurious. Even better, monsters do not appear inside the cell, meaning he can finally sleep without worrying about being attacked during the night. For Yamagishi, this is one of the best things he has experienced in a very long time. He sincerely thanks the old man for it. The old man only chuckles and tells Yamagishi not to act so tough. He then throws some food toward him, giving him a piece of bread and something to drink. Yamagishi stares at the bread with genuine gratitude. During his time guarding the border, there is almost nothing around him except sand and rocks. The only edible plant available there is a kind of hard-shelled bean, and eating it so often leaves his mouth bleeding repeatedly. It has been a very long time since Yamagishi has seen food that looks this good. He thanks the old man once again. The old man then warns him that there will be a great deal of paperwork to complete later, including a death certificate. Yamagishi simply laughs at the idea. He refuses to believe that he is going to die, especially when he has already written and submitted his report without lying about a single thing. The old man tells him to say all of that in court tomorrow. Yamagishi understands and accepts that he will have to explain everything before the military court. The old man then turns around and walks away, leaving Yamagishi alone inside the cell. Yamagishi watches the man's back as he leaves, quietly observing the expression on his face. Yamagishi returns to his bread and continues eating it slowly, savoring every bite as the simple food tastes incredibly good to him. After months of surviving on almost nothing but the harsh conditions of the border, even an ordinary piece of bread feels like something precious. Outside the cell, several guards continue talking among themselves. Their voices drift through the area and reach Yamagishi's ears. Instead of finding the noise disturbing, Yamagishi feels strangely comforted by the sound of other people talking. After spending so much time alone at the border, the presence of human voices feels peaceful to him. He takes the blanket from the bed, settles himself down, and eventually falls asleep while wondering what the military trial will be like the next day. While Yamagishi sleeps peacefully inside the cell, the guards outside notice that he is completely motionless. They assume that he has passed out. Their conversation soon turns toward Yamagishi's report. The guards discuss how most people consider the report to be fabricated, with some even calling it an embarrassment to the military. They laugh as they talk about one particular part of the report, claiming that Yamagishi supposedly defeats 50 people by himself the previous month. To them, the story is simply too ridiculous to believe. The guards continue discussing what will happen to him, explaining that Yamagishi is going to be accused of committing a crime. However, not everyone among them feels comfortable mocking him. Some of the guards quietly see Yamagishi as a frightening man, especially after hearing about the things he supposedly does at the border. Because of that fear, they choose to remain silent rather than say anything too openly. They lower their heads and keep their distance from the cell. Eventually, morning arrives. Yamagishi wakes up and immediately begins his usual morning routine as if he is still back at the border. He starts with squats, casually lifting the entire bed with nothing more than his little finger as he exercises. After that, he moves on to push-ups, supporting his body with his fingertips while his mind remains occupied with another concern. He wonders where his enormous sword is going to end up after everything that has happened. Before he can think about it for too long, Yamagishi is summoned for the military trial. 2 guards approach him and take their positions on his right and left sides, escorting him toward the courtroom. Yamagishi enters a large chamber where 3 men are already seated before him. 2 guards escort him inside and announce that they have brought Private Second-Class Yamagishi as ordered. One of the men, wearing a hat and a veil that covers part of his face, orders Yamagishi to stand in the designated position in front of them. Around the room, several people quietly whisper among themselves as they watch him. The veiled man then asks Yamagishi why he believes he has been brought there. Yamagishi already knows that the trial concerns his report. A mustached man immediately declares that the report is false and contains repeated inconsistencies. However, he says there is another, much more serious problem. Yamagishi is also accused of murdering Major Tornia. Yamagishi is completely confused by the accusation. He does not understand why anyone would accuse him of murder, nor does he even know who actually commits the crime. Another man explains that Second Lieutenant Tornia receives Yamagishi's report, and there is supposedly strong evidence connecting Yamagishi to the murder. Yamagishi asks what evidence they are talking about, still unable to understand how such evidence could exist. The same old man who previously sends Yamagishi to the cell then steps forward as a witness. He claims that he sees Yamagishi being interrogated about his report and then murdering Second Lieutenant Tornia afterward. Yamagishi immediately denies killing anyone. But the old man raises a piece of clothing as evidence. He explains that evidence is collected from inside the tent, including the sword allegedly used in the murder and the clothing belonging to Lieutenant Tornia. One of the men in the room states that Yamagishi cannot simply escape the accusation by explaining himself. Yet Yamagishi still cannot understand where he supposedly makes his mistake. He points out that the entire border area is covered in mud and sand. If Lieutenant Tornia is truly inside the tent, then his clothes should also contain traces of mud and sand. Yamagishi explains that the area's magic cling effect adheres to natural materials, meaning contamination on clothing cannot simply disappear. If the officials do not believe him, there should be someone who can verify this evidence by examining the clothes themselves. The veiled man, however, shows no interest in Yamagishi's explanation. He declares that the details of Yamagishi's false report are already enough to serve as evidence connecting him to the murder. Yamagishi continues insisting that he has not killed anyone and that everything in his report is true. Then, without giving him any further opportunity to defend himself, the verdict is announced. Yamagishi is sentenced to death. His body immediately struggles as two soldiers seize him and begin dragging him away. The military trial is declared over. The mustached man then remarks that he has always opposed allowing useless people into the military, even as auxiliary forces. He tells Yamagishi that the Taraba military court does not need useless people like him. To Yamagishi, the entire proceeding feels like an insult directed at an outsider. He has already heard that some members of the military dislike recruiting outsiders as mercenaries. Now he realizes that they are using him as an excuse to remove people they do not want around, placing a murder accusation on him simply because he is convenient to blame. Yamagishi has spent months holding the front line by himself, surviving without enough food or proper sleep, and in return, this is the treatment he receives. None of it feels remotely fair. The man wearing the hat then turns toward another officer named Lieutenant German and leaves the rest of the matter to him, ordering German to execute Yamagishi. Yamagishi accepts the order and remains strangely calm. The official recording of the trial is now finished, meaning German and the soldiers can speak freely without having to maintain the formal atmosphere of the court. Lieutenant German looks directly at Yamagishi and begins to grin. He says that he will personally kill Yamagishi for the violent acts he has supposedly committed. Yamagishi falls silent. At this moment, he finally understands just how rotten the Taraba military has been from the beginning. German raises his sword and prepares to deliver the execution. He gives Yamagishi a final farewell and mocks the report that Yamagishi writes, claiming that the fabricated document has supposedly saved German from the crimes he commits. German even says that writing such a false document must have been difficult. His excitement grows as he prepares to swing. But before the blade can reach Yamagishi, something suddenly flashes from German's hand. Yamagishi's expression changes completely. His eyes begin to shine with a dangerous excitement as he remarks that human blood glitters even more beautifully than monster blood. Every guard in the room freezes in shock. One of them realizes that Yamagishi takes the sword away with incredible speed. The soldiers curse and shout at him, but Yamagishi is already moving. He swings his sword once, and the guards are defeated in a single powerful strike. Yamagishi smiles as the smell of blood reaches him, awakening something dangerous inside him. The scent fills him with excitement, but he forces himself to remain under control, refusing to let that excitement consume him completely. He then turns his attention toward Lieutenant German and the remaining soldiers. The soldiers still want to kill him, even though fear is clearly beginning to take hold of them. One of them attempts to draw a weapon from behind Yamagishi, but Yamagishi's hand moves first, drawing his sword before the soldier can complete the attack. Yamagishi calmly reveals one thing about himself. Whenever he sees blood, his desire to kill becomes stronger. Yamagishi points his sword directly at German, who is now sitting on the ground in fear. Yamagishi laughs as he reflects on how his violent instincts are connected to his miserable childhood. He then asks German where his large sword is. German desperately begs him to stop, completely different from the confident man who was preparing to execute him moments earlier. Yamagishi smiles at the contrast. Just moments ago, German is filled with excitement at the thought of killing him, but now his expression has completely changed into one of desperation as he begs Yamagishi to spare his life. Yamagishi gives him a sharp stare, still remembering how German surprises him during the attempted execution. He then directs his sword toward German's left ear and swings. German screams in pain as the blade cuts through his ear. Yamagishi calmly sits down and, with the same unsettling smile, asks once again where his large sword is. German remains silent and refuses to answer. Yamagishi tilts his head and asks whether German truly does not need his right ear as well. Before German can respond, several guards rush into the room after hearing the commotion. They ask what has happened, but German immediately orders them to kill Yamagishi. Yamagishi does not wait for them to surround him. He leaps away and escapes from the room. As he runs through the building, Yamagishi realizes that he has been deliberately framed as a criminal, which means his sword must have been confiscated and stored somewhere as evidence. He begins searching for it while moving through the corridors. 3 guards attempt to stop him, raising their swords as they surround him, but Yamagishi defeats them almost immediately. He continues forward without slowing down, opening one door after another in search of his weapon. Every time another guard attempts to block his path, Yamagishi draws his sword with calm precision and takes them down before they can properly react. Despite searching through room after room, he still cannot find his enormous sword. Yamagishi decides that the weapon may have been taken underground, so he prepares to search the lower levels. But before he can continue, something catches his attention behind a set of iron bars. Inside the barred area, Yamagishi sees a young girl with long ears sitting behind the cell. The girl is wearing torn clothes, and her entire body is covered in injuries. Her hands are bound with chains, while the wounds across her body look like the result of severe beatings. Seeing her in such a condition makes Yamagishi feel guilty about simply leaving her behind in a place like this. As he approaches the cell, the girl becomes frightened and immediately begs him not to hurt her. Yamagishi crouches down in front of her and calmly assures her that he is not going to do anything to her. The girl notices the blood covering Yamagishi's body. Yamagishi smiles and explains that the blood is not his. It is only splattered across him from the soldiers he fights inside the building. The girl then asks whether Yamagishi is a rebel. Yamagishi agrees, although he admits that the situation is not exactly that simple. He explains that he has been framed as a criminal and intends to escape, then asks the girl if she knows where his enormous sword is. From her reaction, Yamagishi realizes that she has no idea where it is. Before he can ask anything else, the voices of soldiers echo through the building as they order the others to capture Yamagishi. The girl suddenly begs Yamagishi to help her. She explains that the people here accuse her of crimes she never commits. Yamagishi initially finds it difficult to believe her, but he cannot ignore the fact that he has just experienced almost the exact same thing himself. He has also been falsely accused and condemned for something he never does. The girl desperately asks him to believe her. Yamagishi finally agrees. He draws his sword and uses it to cut through the chains around her hands, freeing her from the restraints. The girl thanks him sincerely. Yamagishi notices that she is beautiful, but there is no time for him to think about that. He tells her that she can follow him if she wants, but he makes it clear that he takes no responsibility for what happens to her afterward. The two of them immediately begin running through the building. They soon encounter a group of around 10 guards blocking their path. One of the soldiers shouts and aims a weapon directly at the two of them. Yamagishi quickly raises the sword in his hand and deflects the attack, but the weapon suddenly breaks because its blade is too dull to withstand the impact. The girl tells Yamagishi that if he needs another sword, she can create one for him. Yamagishi does not hesitate and simply tells her to make one. Fern begins praying to the gods. The guards notice that she is doing something and immediately turn their weapons back toward Yamagishi and the girl. They prepare to fire again. Suddenly, a bright light begins shining from Yamagishi's hand, and a new sword takes shape within his grasp. The guards panic and shout for everyone to fire. A barrage of shots is launched toward them, but Yamagishi calmly deflects every attack from the front with his newly created sword. The weapon is extraordinary. Despite blocking attack after attack, it does not even leave a scratch on the edge of the blade. Yamagishi looks toward the girl and remarks that the sword she creates is an excellent one. The girl lets out a relieved sigh. They continue running through the building, deflecting one attack after another as more soldiers appear in front of them. Every time the soldiers attempt to stop them, Yamagishi clears their path and keeps moving forward with Fern following closely behind. Eventually, the two of them finally make it out of the building. Yamagishi shouts that they should be safe now. He then looks behind him and is surprised to see that Fern has followed him perfectly throughout the entire escape. Fern thanks him for helping her, while Yamagishi also thanks her for creating the sword. Fern finally introduces herself by name, telling him that she is Fern. Yamagishi introduces himself as well and compliments Fern on her incredible magic. He admits that he wishes he could use magic like that himself. Fern looks surprised because she assumes that Yamagishi has been using physical enhancement magic throughout the entire battle. Yamagishi simply laughs and explains that he cannot use magic at all. Fern begins to realize that the strange glowing light is actually Yamagishi's natural ability, along with the incredible speed at which he cuts through things. She becomes increasingly curious and asks who Yamagishi really is. Yamagishi insists that there is nothing complicated about him. He is simply Yamagishi, a private second class. Fern lets out a small laugh and says that Yamagishi is a very interesting person. Before they can continue, more soldiers suddenly arrive to capture them. Yamagishi immediately reacts, swinging his sword with incredible speed and defeating all of the soldiers in an instant. He then smiles and invites Fern to leave with him. Fern smiles as well, finding Yamagishi fascinating, although another part of her cannot help but think that he is also a terrifying person.